Hello, and thank you for generously giving your time to our session today on the biodiversity imperative for business, where we will explore the intrinsic interconnectedness of healthy and functioning biodiversity with the health and wealth of business. I'm Sue Mulhall, the Biodiversity and Business Partnership Manager for BirdLife International. Okay, firstly, in regards to the threat of climate change, I'm sure you're all aware of the IPCC report and as a result have implemented climate action strategies in your business. Well, in 2019, IPBES, which is the equivalent of the IPCC but for biodiversity, launched an alarming global assessment which identified that up to 1 million species currently face the threat of extinction. This is far more than at any other time in human history. And birds have long been the messengers of these twin environmental threats of climate change and biodiversity loss, and they can also help inform solutions for nature and people. And that is because they're the indicators, the early warning signal of the health of our planet, because they're everywhere. They're mobile and responsive to environmental and climate change, and they're the first movers. Basically, other species follow their trends, and birds are more studied and better understood than any other taxa. And they've been telling us for quite a while that we've got a significant problem. And every year, the World Economic Forum release this global risk landscape report, and it covers various issues across the economy, environment, geopolitical, social, and tech. And those issues are then mapped across the axis of likelihood and impact. And this was launched just in Davos, January of this year. And so that was before the, COVID-19 became the global pandemic that it is today. And yet still, biodiversity loss was ranked the second most likely risk and the third most impactful risk for the next decade. And I would expect in 2021, that's going to be higher. But anyway, biodiversity loss, it has critical implications for humanity, whether it's from the collapse of food and health systems to the disruption of entire supply chains, and also the emergence of zoonotic diseases such as SARS, MERS, Ebola, and COVID-19. These are triggered by habitat loss, which drives displacement of animals, which results in increased human interaction and illegal trade. So what do we mean when we say biodiversity? Because biodiversity is often interchangeable with other words such as wildlife, ecosystems, and most commonly nature. It's all of these things. It is the infrastructure which supports all life on Earth. And planet Earth was exceptionally well designed, with each species contributing to an interconnected ecosystem. So in essence, if you think of planet Earth like giant Jenga, and currently we're driving the extinction of species and therefore their interaction with other species, which is resulting in an exceptionally fragile ecosystem, which will eventually collapse. The IPBES report also states that the current negative trends in biodiversity, and ecosystems will undermine 80% of the targets of SDGs 1, 2, 3, 6, 11, 13, 14, and 15. This includes no poverty, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life below water, and life on land. We must address the biodiversity crisis now to be able to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are separate but interconnected. Protecting biodiversity is an imperative in its own right, and doing so can provide 30% or more of the mitigation action needed to limit the average temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. This is another great report from the World Economic Forum, and it is The Future of Nature and Business Policy Companion. It's a great read, and it's about the economic value of nature. And I'll just highlight that economic value for natural forests and mangroves. So, natural forests store 40 times more carbon than plantation equivalents, and they are hotspots of biodiversity. Yet the rate of tropical forest loss is 1 football pitch every 6 seconds, and it has remained high for the past 2 decades. Restoring degraded forests will generate between $7 and $30 in economic benefits for every single dollar invested. It is also a relatively low-skilled and labor-intensive exercise, and so, in today's climate, where global employment is forecast to decrease by up to 240 million jobs, this is an attractive proposition, particularly in Asia, which is potentially going to be worst hit. Similarly, there is a 10-to-1 return from mangrove conservation and restoration. Mangrove forests provide more than $80 billion per year in avoided losses from coastal flooding and directly protect 18 million people in coastal areas. They also contribute 40 to 50 billion annually through fisheries, forestry, and recreation benefits. Every $1 invested in mangrove conservation and restoration generates a benefit of $3, with conservation of existing mangroves yielding significantly higher benefits of 88-to-1 versus restoring degraded ones. Excuse me. Okay, so at BirdLife and Malaysia Nature Society, our purpose is to conserve global biodiversity, habitats, and birds, working with business and people in the sustainable use of nature's resources. Our modus operandi is science, partnership, and practical action. So science, all that we do, it is underpinned by evidence. We are the Avian Authority for the IUCN Red List. We have identified over 13,000 key biodiversity areas across land and sea, and we monitor the threats to those KBAs from both industry and human impacts. And then we also inform international policy dialogue and multilateral environmental agreements. And our scientists were contributing authors in that IPBES report. Partnership. BirdLife is a unique partnership model. BirdLife International is the secretariat for 117 partners in 115 countries. MNS, or you may know them as Malaysia Nature Society, is BirdLife in Malaysia. Locally, our partners have got boots on the ground in and around forests with an acute insight at both landscape and community level of the issues and the most relevant solutions, and they've got the legitimacy to engage at all levels of government. Globally, as the Secretariat, we orchestrate and amplify initiatives and their impact. And we believe in practical action on the ground with local communities, business, and government. And we have 9 global conservation programs, and I'd like to briefly highlight our work in conserving global biodiversity, habitats, and birds. So, key biodiversity areas, KBAs. As I mentioned, we have a database of over 13,000, and we monitor the threats. The principal driver of biodiversity loss is human impact, and most significantly through resource extraction, production, service provision, and consumption, which results in land and sea use change, direct overexploitation, climate change, pollution of soil, water, and air, and also the spread of invasive species, which basically is damaging the same ecosystems and resources critical to business success in the first place. Now, there's many sectors that are contributing to this loss, and in multiple ways. For example, farming is directly contributing to land and sea use change, climate change, pollution of soil, water and air, and the spread of invasive species. And you need to consider the impact across the entire value chain. So, that also includes production, transport, and consumer waste. None of these sectors operate in isolation. To help business understand their biodiversity risk, because you need to understand it to be able to manage it, we have the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool called IBAT. This is an alliance between ourselves, BirdLife International, Conservation International, IUCN, and UNWCMC. And basically, it incorporates all of our data sets, so our 13,000 KBAs, the IUCN Red List across all species, and UNEP's protected areas. So those protected areas, whether they're nationally protected, UNESCO or Ramsar, etc. And think of IBAT as Google Maps. So you can pinpoint a location and then you can do a search up to a 50-kilometre radius, which will draw from all of those data sets and inform you if your operations are, say, in or bordering a KBA or a protected area, what species are in that area, and what their vulnerability is. So, for example, are they critically endangered? And our subscribers generally use IBAT as a risk screening tool. Our intent is to work upfront with business and industry to safeguard biodiversity alongside economic development. For example, in the instance of Mongolia, we worked with the World Bank to provide recommendations for site safeguarding alongside the development of key economic sectors of mining, infrastructure and tourism. We certainly do not want to hold back economic development, but both can prosper together. Sustainable landscapes. So habitats, we not only manage forests, but we work with communities in and around forests. And specifically looking at, Malaysia, it is just a stunning country. You have the 12th mega diverse country in the world, an exceptionally biodiversity rich country. And that biodiversity has been the resource backbone for economic prosperity in tin mining, rubber, oil palm, oil and gas industries to date. And as a developing nation, the economy has to thrive within the background of a forested landscape. But these resources must be sustainably and equitably managed. And BirdLife and Malaysian Nature Society work with communities, industry and businesses in these sectors and more, to ensure that sustainable and equitable management. So as I said at the beginning, our purpose is to conserve global biodiversity, habitats and birds. And right now, we are in the midst of the planet's 6th mass extinction, and that means 1 in 8 species are threatened with extinction. The threats vary per species, per habitat, per country, and they require unique and multi-year conservation action plans to reduce the threat of extinction, because once extinct, there is no point of return. So, for example, in the instance of vultures, the threat is poisoning. Vultures are nature's sanitary workers, and they're being poisoned by this drug, which I can never pronounce. It's a veterinary drug which is given to cattle, and it's lethal for vultures because basically, when 48 hours after feeding on the carcasses of cows, they die from kidney failure. And in a country like India, the vulture population just collapsed, and that resulted in a surge of feral dogs by 5.5 million, which spread rabies and led to an estimated 47,000 odd human deaths. Now, over its lifetime, a single vulture provides waste disposal services worth around $10,000 US. In the instance of the helmeted hornbill, the majestic bird behind me, the issue is illegal hunting and trade. The helmeted hornbill is Asia's largest hornbill. It lives in pristine rainforests, and it's the only hornbill with this solid cast, which can fetch US $1,000 on the black market. Evidence suggests that the species is being hunted by, well-funded and well-organised crime syndicates. They even provide snares and firearms to poachers and local traders, who in turn target other species at the same time, such as pangolins and tigers. And tigers are also threatened by habitat loss and fragmentation. And in the instance of the Malayan tiger, it is on the verge of extinction, with population levels at less than 200. Even though the rate of habitat loss in Peninsular Malaysia has stabilised, the effect of forest fragmentation has isolated tiger populations, and so therefore that's made them vulnerable and has increased the incidences of human-tiger conflict, including illegal trade. BirdLife and Malaysian Nature Society, we've got conservation plans to not only protect these species, but even more, many more, and also to increase their population levels. So, back to biodiversity and business. biodiversity, it is abundantly rich. You know, there's millions and millions of species. And if we use birds as messengers and focus on the habitats where they are under threat, we will naturally save a much wider variety of species at the same time. So, dependencies between business and biodiversity. Products that we consume and use day in, day out, and never give a thought to their origin are heavily dependent upon healthy, functioning landscapes, which are equally reliant upon healthy, functioning species and ecosystems, right down to the health of the soil and the pollination. Landscapes. You know, so businesses rely on healthy biodiversity and functioning ecosystems, as we just mentioned, not only for the agriculture and the resource extraction, but, you know, surrounding, you know, they need healthy functioning landscapes surrounding their operations to provide services such as clean water. You know, but unfortunately, there are some negative impacts by business on biodiversity, you know, and business has externalities whereby the environmental cost is not borne by business. For example, soil erosion, river sedimentation, and pollution. And in the instance of coastal resilience, the cost is not only borne by governments, but by citizens through their insurance premiums. So biodiversity has inherent use and role in our daily lives, whether it be for well-being or for function, and businesses take inspiration from species to build their brand value, even when there is no direct link, or often without investment in the protection of that species. So the business case for protecting biodiversity is clear, and it intersects many facets of business operations and management. You know, for example, including your social license to operate, supply chain management, community engagement, reporting and disclosures, climate action, and government relations, just to name a few. And the BirdLife Partnership, along with the Boston Consulting Group, launched this report just last month. This report informs the economic value of biodiversity, the drivers behind biodiversity loss, and the systemic change required now. So, bringing it back closer to home, biodiversity and business partnerships. I'm going to share 3 sector examples, being renewable energy, rubber and palm oil, and minerals, where BirdLife and Malaysian Nature Society operate. So, renewable energy. The issue here is investment and development is accelerating, but without environmental standards and tools in place. So for us, we want to work up front with industry to enable the fast tracking of finance and development, but we just want to ensure that the sites are selected which are of low ecological sensitivity. And evidence-based data indicates there are sufficient locations worldwide that meet projected energy demand and are of low ecological sensitivity. And this is especially important for governments to plan beyond a site level to national level, and even bioregional planning, particularly across migratory flyways. Hence, with the support of ADB, the Asian Development Bank, we are developing an open source sensitivity mapping tool to guide siting for solar, onshore, offshore wind and transmission lines, along with guidance notes for governments, financiers and developers. The current geographic focus for this map is India, Thailand and Vietnam. However, we are seeking financial support to include Malaysia and other countries in Asia. As moving forward, Asia Pacific will have the largest renewable energy footprint in the world. Okay, rubber and oil palm. In the instance of rubber, an estimated 4 to 8 million hectares, which is, let's say, the equivalent of Sri Lanka, is required by 2024 to meet the increased global demand, of which 90% of this will come from Southeast Asia alone. So hence, we want to ensure a sustainable and equitable supply chain. And so we are highly active in industry platforms such as the Global Platform for Sustainable Natural Rubber and also the RSPO. And we work with these platforms and their members in a number of areas, including policy and planning frameworks, improved market access for smallholders, technical expertise to expand from production unit planning to integrated landscape planning, biodiversity risk management and action plans, biodiversity baseline assessments, and also training. And one last example being minerals. You know, mineral extraction operations have a direct and indirect impact on the environment. And we collaborate to integrate a biodiversity conservation approach into planning and management processes through a range of scope. You know, this includes strengthening regulations and standards, promoting the business case for biodiversity, both risks and opportunities. You know, we identify the high priority sites for action based on proximity to high value conservation areas. We do that through conducting proximity studies, then develop action plans and can conduct training, also baseline assessments. We also do habitat restoration and site rehabilitation at the end of life for a mine. And we do this with leading multinational businesses. So in summary, the BirdLife Partnership, we have a range of data, tools, consultation practices and landscapes to inform evidence-based policy and practice. We work with supply chain and procurement teams in regards to transforming business as usual practices across the pillars of biodiversity data and tools, science-based consultation, and in landscapes with communities. And also with your corporate affairs and communications teams in regards to a range of CSR and sponsorship activities. Biodiversity and business team, we invite you to reach out directly to any one of us. Belu, our Head of Conservation for Malaysia, will join me in the discussion. So thank you very much for your interest, and please feel free to pose any and as many questions as you like. Thank you.
All right, Prof, it's live now.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I forgot to introduce my name. I thought everybody know my name. Ahmad Ismail, President of Malaysian Nature Society. I think everybody know Malaysian Nature Society, at least in Malaysia. If you don't know, you can Google www.mns.my and become a member. Number two, MNS is 80 years old now. So I think everybody should know, and we must put in the history so that we can learn in school. Right, today we're going to discuss about biodiversity and business. Maybe you have heard about what Sue has mentioned, our panelist today, in her presentation on biodiversity, on climate change, on SDG, and what we want to move next for our conservation of biodiversity. And as Malaysia is top 12 in the world, we have to, I mean, all Malaysians must know this and respect and try to value it, and then realize that one thing, we contribute to the world, right? So I think maybe before we go further, I need to ask Mr. Balu, how far MNS is contributing to what I mentioned just now, what Sue has presented in the nice presentation. I listened it again and again, and now I understand. And then all of us should try to help to implement what the mission was highlighted. So, Mr. Balu, what is our MNS concern about this SDG, about climate change and biodiversity conservation?
Thank you, Prof, and good morning, everyone. All right, I'm the head of conservation in Malaysian Nature Society. The way that we operate is we are here in Malaysia as an NGO to support Malaysia's goals in achieving, first of all, how do we comply and also implement activities, conservation activities, in relation to the Convention of Biological Diversity. Second is how do we also assist the government to comply with the the Paris Agreement. Okay, and of course, in our development agenda for Malaysia, how do we also fulfill our SDG commitment that we have actually outlined? Okay, so in this sense, MNS as a nature-based organization, okay, we have done a lot of work, in the past, okay, helping the country to safeguard, our natural heritage, we call it, okay, getting the population of Malaysia, not only to know and understand about our nature, but also to value them, okay, and in the process also acting for nature. So we have done a lot of work in the past, and I think our track record is testament to what we have done so far. We have helped the state government in the protection of state park and national parks. Okay, conducted a lot of scientific activities, mobilized scientific community to assist with the information gathering with regard to biodiversity and highlight them how important our country is in terms of biodiversity conservation, and also we have a huge footprint in the education sector, working together with the Ministry of Education, mobilizing the school children, the school community, in the understanding and the preservation of our natural heritage moving forward. So saying that our core area of business in MNS is actually biodiversity and climate change, right? So we act locally, but also we think globally. So this is where our partnership with BirdLife International becomes very, very important. As Sue have mentioned, MNS is the country partner for BirdLife International, and we together with another 115 countries, okay, are working together to achieve the global goals that have been set worldwide. So our discussion today will be focusing more on how business community, okay, are engaged in Malaysia, and how MNS actually plays a bigger role in it at the global level, how we are working together with BirdLife International to engage the bigger companies, all right, which are operating throughout the world, and try to reduce the impact on the environment. So that's it for now, Prof. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I just remember you mentioned 80% of the SDG is about biodiversity, if I'm right. So can you explain this, because it's very important, because when it's involved 80% of SDG, we got 17, and then and it's across the SDG Sustainable Development Goal 2030, and it looked like a very integrated approach. So can you explain more about that?
Yes, certainly. Thanks. So the IPBES report, which was, the assessment of the global state of biodiversity and ecosystems, they're the ones that said within, I think it's just double checking, 8 SDGs, 80% of those targets of those 8 SDGs will not be met if we don't address the decline in biodiversity. And, it's quite straightforward in one way without being an ecologist, because I'm not. And that is that, the SDGs are a pyramid, they're not linear. So we have our biosphere, and so that is the life on land, the life on water, that's clean water and sanitation, and then climate change. And then we have society sitting on top of that. And so that's the no poverty, the health and well-being, equal opportunity, etc. And then the economy sits on top of that. So therefore, the most at risk are all 4 of the biosphere. So, then it's sort of back to my, example of the giant Jenga. If they're not functioning, then society can't function. And if society's not functioning properly, well, then the economy cannot. And so the 8 SDGs that are risk and 80% of those targets are the support to the economy. So it will ultimately have an impact on the economy as well.
Okay, thank you. So because people now are talking about poverty, hunger, clean water, so all those are basic things. If we are not settled on that, we cannot talk about biodiversity. So demand
they're all ecosystem services, aren't they? You know,
yeah.
Poverty, hunger, clean water.
Yeah, those are but we need people to understand that. Otherwise, people saying about poverty, give them jobs and salary, hunger, give them food. So finally, we cut the forest, we plant the tree for food, and we have a plantation for jobs and factory and so on. So this is misunderstood about biodiversity conservation and then SDG overall. So we need to clarify this. And what is from your experience and networking with other people, can you suggest something that good, easy to apply so that the whole public, especially in Malaysia, and understand about SDG?
I think the SDGs are a great organisation tool for business to get behind and for them to do their reporting as well. But I think I'd like to take a step back for a moment because, you know, business has been, you know, the focus has been on climate action. And, you know, for business to develop their targets and their strategies and their actions behind that. And now we're saying, well, you have to do nature as well, you know, biodiversity and nature. So I think that we have to help business connect the two because we're not asking them to ignore what they're already doing within climate action. We want them to increase that, but we want them to also consider biodiversity because biodiversity protection is 30% of the climate solution. And I think for business, whilst it may not necessarily be crystal clear right now, we are at a tipping point where, you know, now is the time to start engaging in conversations, start understanding how it is relevant to your business, you know, talking to M&S, which can help guide that, because I think there are 5 significant market forces at play right now. And I think first and foremost, there is, and some of that was presented, there is data on the impact. You know, so like, for example, if you're putting all of your efforts behind no poverty right now, you know, it's diminished efforts if you're not also, if the world is not protecting biodiversity. So there's lots of data, evidence-based data on the impact. There is a lot of evidence-based data, which again, you know, some of that was shared in the presentation on the value of nature. So we're not doing this for the good of our heart. We're doing this because it makes good business sense as well. Yeah. So I think those fundamentals are there to make the business case. But the big game changer, which is really getting at a tipping point, is finance. Okay, so what was launched just in July this year was the Task Force for Nature-Related Disclosures. So this is the equivalent of the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosures. Okay. Oh. So that was launched in July this year. Most of the most prominent financial institutions are founding members, and they're in that working group to, you know, develop the framework. So therefore, you know, once these market forces are in play, it helps everybody get on the train. Okay, you know, it's not about being a first mover. The other significant thing, and this has you know, heightened in volume and in action because of COVID, is ESG. So I think I'm not 100% sure. I think in Malaysia at the moment, you know, it's encouraged to do your ESG sustainability reporting if you're a publicly listed company. But in many parts of the world, it's constantly being mandated. So if it's not mandated yet in Malaysia, I suspect it will soon be. But regardless, there has just been this amplification around ESG since COVID. Okay, and so it's on environmental, it's social and governance. It's all of it. It's not just social that the focus is. And so what we're seeing is that, you know, asset managers are employing analysts to quiz, you know, big multinational companies as to how robust is their ESG strategy, what is their risk mitigation within their ESG strategy, and also, again, back to evidence-based data, whether it's Sustainalytics, which, you know, evaluate ESG rankings of companies, or whether it's Refinitiv, or whether it's MSCI, all of them, they say that top ESG companies outperform the average S&P 500. Okay, so again, get your house in order on ESG, and, you know, have a roadmap to continuous improvement on that ESG, because, you know, investors are scrutinizing it, and that scrutiny will increase, but also the numbers are there that your business will be better off as well. And then the other factor with with finance is, you know, the growth in sustainability linked loans. You know, it's absolutely increasing. All of the banks are getting behind it. OLAM just got their third ESG or sustainability linked loan in 2 years, worth 250 million. Another multinational company that BirdLife works with, just in October, got a sustainability linked loan of 3.2 billion. So that was minimum savings of 3.2 million to them. Okay, so, you know, investing in these actions benefit your business and benefit the bottom line as well. And then one last comment on that about these market forces at the moment. You know, on top of that is, you know, focusing on a green recovery, investing in a green recovery. Now, to date, we've seen that sort of mostly articulated through the European Commission and their recovery fund. But their recovery fund, which is all about repair and prepare for the next generation, that fund is about, the two principal guidelines are, one, short-term impact to stimulate jobs and incremental investment by business. You know, so let's say, and then the second one is activities which are sustainable and with a focus on decarbonisation, digitisation and resilience. You know, so therefore, if you're investing in renewable energy, you know, that's definitely driving decarbonisation, and it will also stimulate jobs, and it will stimulate investment by the private sector as well. So I think they're the market forces that everybody should start to really sit down, and if they haven't got a progressed plan, start, you know, having conversations with the likes of M&S and others to really develop a robust plan and roadmap.
It looks like we need to have another big forum involving these corporate sectors or business people on biodiversity, so that number one, they understand, and those who already have the experience, they can contribute, especially now when we are promoting Ulu Muda towards a state park, and we have done under Rompin. Maybe we need to look at under Rompin also for this continuous monitoring and development, whatever necessary for conservation. And then we have done in Belum Temenggo, and now still in progress, and it's a very important place. We have a tiger there. We need to seriously protect the area, and then we need to bring the corporate sector to support, so that the government not just depending on timber and continuously practice logging. Right? So Mr. Balu, M&S is 80 years now, how far people in corporate sector look M&S movement or helping in protecting and conserve nature. You have mentioned just now we are helping the government to protect nature. We know that government has some limitation. We have a good policy, but we don't have enough people to look after, and then we don't have public support. I mean, strong public support on this. That's what M&S are helping. So now, how far the private sectors are working together or accept our fighting, or whatever you want to say, to protect and conserve nature?
Thank you, Prof. For information, we can say the lifeline of M&S working in Malaysia actually is through private company and corporate infusion of funds to M&S basically, because they are the biggest contributor of funding to M&S, and these funds are then used to support our ongoing projects and activities. In terms of figures, every year we get close to about 70% or more from private and public donation, and then the 30% is what we actually raise ourselves. So given that background, we also have companies, they do a lot of CSR activities through M&S, a lot of activities engaging with the communities, living around or near to their establishment or in the state that they actually operate. So you can see here the private companies are giving back to the community, part of their profit. Plus, I think when Sue mentioned about sustainability, there are also companies, especially in Malaysia, those companies in the first board, they are required to prepare sustainability reports. Every year it's a requirement, right? It's also a way of government encouraging the companies, the businesses to give back to the people. Okay, so, along the principle of 3 P's, people, planet, and profit. Very specifically, I can mention 2 companies which have been our partner for a long-term period. So these are companies which have supported us more than 5 years, in one particular project. Okay, so the first example is Petronas. Okay, we have education center which was established in Kerteh, Terengganu. Okay, so they invested in the establishment of the center, which is about, I think, close to about 5 million, and then they provided us funds to run the center for the 10 years. Okay, so that was from 2010 to 2020. Okay, so this is one of the way that the companies are providing back. The other one, and this has been reported in their sustainability report, and they also have won a lot of awards as well. Right? The other one is actually on a wildlife conservation project, very specifically on Sunbed Conservation Project, which is actually supported by Felda Global Ventures, a palm oil company, which works with a lot of smallholder farmers. Okay, it's a group kind of certification. So they are RSPO member. They are also MSPO member. Okay, which are focused on certifying their products and also their areas, plantation areas, as sustainably managed areas. So they work with us for the last 5 years, from 2016 to 2020. Okay, also a long-term project where they want to showcase that, besides doing their normal business, but they are also very well aware and also very well participatory in a government. This is actually a government-led project to save the sun bear. So we work in a lot of wildlife conflict areas, especially in Felda plantations, because most of the time their plantation borders with the forest area or even the protected areas. So these are considered as a very high conflict areas for wildlife. And we work with them. One is to reduce the conflict, to save the wildlife. Okay, we do rescue, 3R exercise, rescue, rehabilitate, and release program with them. So far, under the 5 years project, we have actually saved about 50 individual of sun bears, and also, following the 3R, we have released back close to 90% of these animals back to nature, where they are monitored throughout. So these are the kind of activities that we are doing. Besides, of course, we also have a very long-standing work with Coca-Cola. Okay, Coca-Cola. They have supported us for a long time as well, working on water-related project, to reduce their water footprint, and also supporting the local communities wherever they are living. So this is also quite some examples, where the businesses very consciously, participate with us in a long-term partnership program. So they are not just a CSR kind of a organization, because they link, whatever they provide to their sustainability vision and mission as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Balu. Meaning that in the process of MNS working for better education or understanding about nature, and then involving public and conservation like sun bear, tiger, and hornbills, it shows like this corporate sector, agencies, they understand or truly understand, or just part of their normal CSR. So this is need to well explain, because I highlight that because people still asking what is the importance of biodiversity in business, and how this SDG is, as I mentioned earlier, well understood by the industrial players. And then because these people sometimes pollute the environment and effect of long chain or give a long chain effect to the ecosystem. For example, you have heard about river pollution, Kim near Singapore, and then other highlighted issues that disrupt the water supply. And this all about contamination from industrial activities. This is part of SDG for conservation, life above ground, life underwater, and so on. So how you want to explain this? Because if these two have a conflict in their mind, what is the importance of biodiversity in business and how they can support SDG? I think we have only 10 years to go for SDG 2030. Right.
Okay. So firstly, I think, SDGs, climate action and biodiversity action can be integrated, okay? It doesn't have to be either or. So, don't get distracted and think it's all too complex and, oh, it's another new thing and maybe it'll be something else next year. It won't be. This is it for the next decade, okay, till 2030. And I think historically, business and consumers, so me as a consumer, we've just been taking from nature. We haven't stopped to think. We've thought that it's been an endless supply. Whereas, you know, what we know now, and again, back to what we've got all of the evidence-based data, and the impact is that we are over-consuming the planet's resources. So we have to change. And so therefore, I think, you know, historically, you know, CSR activities by business was regarded as philanthropic, you know, and it was a nice thing to do. It wasn't business critical. The shift, the fundamental shift that's taking place in the market and is going to continue as in a forceful way is that we must transform business as usual practices. So, you know, doing this is no longer about, you know, a CSR activity, which is a nice story in your annual report and something done by corporate affairs. This has got to be integrated into the operations, the supply chain, the procurement. And what we're seeing is that's why we're seeing industry bodies. You know, we've had the RSPO for some time. There is now the Global Platform for Sustainable Natural Rubber. And it's about bringing industry together and industry working together in solving the issue. Because one business alone cannot tackle it, even if it's Unilever. A business alone cannot tackle it because you need the entire value chain to come on board, agree to make changes, agree to, you know, initially carry, you know, share the cost or the, you know, the burden in you know, calibrating the business practices. And we're seeing that happen across multiple industries. So again, I think for a business, you know, if you're not currently, you know, got your roadmap, start thinking about it because, you know, the train has left the station, you know, and this is going to only increase. And, you know, back to, you know, BirdLife and MNS, you know, we're here to be pragmatic partners, you know, in informing that policy and practice through evidence-based solutions. You know, we know that there is no silver bullet. There are no, you know, overnight solutions, but we have got only 1 decade, you know, to really make meaningful action.
Thank you, Sue. I think you mentioned about MNS BirdLife partnership. I think this is a very, very important and a good strategy to tackle the issues. Maybe many others, but we already there. BirdLife and MNS partnership is already there, and we are on the way towards what we are discussing now. But I think we need to for next maybe 5 to 10 years, we need to focus towards solving an issue. Say, for example, now we are working together on promoting stakeholders, public and government and agencies to think together on sustainability and protected biodiversity, protect forest and biodiversity. Maybe next project, we have to look at one issue. Say, for example, we have been talking about Ulu Muda, Belum Temenggu, Central Forest Fund, and so on. This is in terms of implementation that we mentioned just now, but we cannot do alone. We need to work together. We can bring more people coming in. Right? Sorry, Balu, I think we need to explain a bit what we have done on citizen science, so that public know what we are doing, and then maybe some collaborating with BirdLife International. So what we do about this citizen science, Balu.
Okay, I can give an example. Okay, our tiger project that we are working with BirdLife International, for instance, we are focusing with a community based in Merapu, okay, where we are looking at establishing a tiger corridor, and this is also part and parcel of a bigger grand program of the government. So we are not doing it in isolation. We are actually supporting the government program in implementing the National Tiger Conservation Action Plan. So what's very interesting about this particular area is to the east, you would have Taman Negara, landscape, and to the west you would have the main range landscape. Okay, and these are all forested landscape. Yeah, and then they are connected, yeah, by a very narrow strip of a land which is about 13 kilometers long. Okay, so the northern part of that particular land, there's our community living, and these are the community that we are working with basically, and they are all basically small rubber farmers, smallholder rubber farmers. We have been working with them for the last 3 years with a partner called Maison du Monde. So they are a furniture company based in France, and they supported our program. And together with BirdLife, we are also working with the smallholder farmers on a fair share, fair share principle for buying of their rubber latex and stuff like that. Okay, so within that area, what we are working is we are looking at two things. One is the conservation aspect, okay, creating a corridor between these two big, huge landscapes for the survival of the tigers, which is less than 200 animals at the moment. Okay, and at the same time, we are working with businesses to support the livelihood of communities around that area. So the kind of activities that's been supported is we are doing we are making sure, one, the community is not going and destroying the environment or even doing a lot of involved in the illegal activities. So those areas are now we actually like implementing what you call as wildlife managed areas, so which means, there are wildlife, the community understand they have to co-live, in harmony with the wildlife, okay, and they are supported in their livelihood, okay, by companies, yeah, who wants to invest in this particular project. So that is one example of how we engage the citizens, for the conservation of tigers. We have other projects also where every year we engage local communities living along the coastal areas into monitoring and documenting or trying to get data, okay, on the migratory birds, right? So come January every year, we engage all this community at overall about 50 different locations throughout Malaysia, including Sabah and Sarawak. So we get this important data and we compile it. So every year we have a good compilation of data, scientific data and current data for the government to be able to, conserve those areas and also help the local community and also the businesses to mainstream around this area, because this is all related to migratory bird, occupying coastal areas, which is also known as productive areas for fisheries and so forth. So these are kind of citizen action activities, so citizen science activities that we are doing, and where we are engaging with our business partners either as part of the CSR contribution, and in the case like I mentioned, some companies were willing to partner with us for a long-term period, okay, in terms of more beneficial partnership, which will also contribute to their sustainability effort. Yeah, but saying that, I mean, with BirdLife International, we are looking beyond just contributing to the community, and also for their maybe related to their branding, but we also thinking about more on really, the businesses taking the lead in conservation. They have to champion activities. So MNS is in the position to provide for this kind of opportunities, because we have that close relationship with the government as well as with the local communities at the grassroots level. Prof, you're muted.
In Australia, so I think they have some program on citizen science. How NGO in Australia, through another bird life activities that can we can learn and share for MNS to make it better for what we are doing now. Because I think MNS is the most, I mean, the biggest NGO working on citizen science for last 10 years before government put it in, not as instruction, but put in their plan. But MNS have done long time ago. For example, we have Red Wash. Last 21 years we did it, and then Mr. Balu mentioned about Asian waterbird census, and then we are working on hornbills now. We have 10 species of hornbills in Belum Temenggu and Ulu Muda need protection, right? We need to understand. So this is part of our program. So how you learn from or you observe in Australia or other country what they are doing, how they are doing, that we can share.
Okay, well, whilst I'm Australian, I live in Singapore and I haven't lived in Australia for about 20 years. Oh. So I can't talk with any first-hand knowledge or experience, but I do know that BirdLife Australia, you know, do seem to have a significant citizen science program and campaign. And I think just, you know, globally within the BirdLife partnership, there's lots of brilliant examples out of Europe as well, particularly because, you know, we are a membership-based organisation. And personally, particularly because of the accessibility of technology and, you know, apps like eBirder, etc., I think there is phenomenal opportunity to do so much more in the area of citizen science, and I think that there is a great appetite from the public to get involved as well.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, I couldn't offer anything more specific.
Yeah, it's okay. I just asked because Australia is just near compared to Europe, America. Maybe we can visit what you have done there. Anyway, this is another issue that in order to achieve what we mentioned earlier on biodiversity conservation, about SDG, and then about business with the biodiversity. Citizen science is one of the things that we need to do it quickly. Maybe for Malaysia, maybe for me in 3 years, maximum is 5 years. We cannot wait until end of 2030. By that time, we don't have the tree anymore if we don't really fight against it, this forest deforestation and so on. If I talk about, just now we talk about river pollution, for example, until they disrupt the water supply. This is another issue. MNS not just looking at the water supply disruption. MNS look at the aquatic organism that is destroyed by the chemical release to the ecosystem, river ecosystem. This is very important, and it causes chain of effect. You know, like when fish are contaminated, fish eaten by birds and so on. Right. Recently, we have oil spill in Port Dickson. I was there, and then was a very good response from the public. MNS participate in this cleaning program, and there's nearly 20 agencies involved in trying to solve this oil spill in very small area. It shows a very good response from Malaysian citizen on this issue. This is what we want to see for the all Malaysian, all right? But not only the oil spill example, the river pollution, poaching also, wildlife illegal trafficking. You know, wildlife trafficking is another issue that we need the public to support. This is why citizen science is important. what a great
But
issue now.
can I just add a
Yeah,
comment on that? I think citizen science is, you know, because we do get a lot of inquiries from, you know, multinational businesses of how can they engage their employees in conservation, and they're looking to do it in a more meaningful way. And I think citizen science is prime opportunity for, you know, companies to engage their employees, and you know, and then there's that opportunity for people that are interested to continue on afterwards. And just on the issue of plastic and plastic pollution in the oceans, you know, whilst there's a lot of awareness and knowledge about, you know, we're all eating a credit card of plastic, you know, a month or something. Seabirds are eating that plastic because they're thinking it's food, and because of the algae, they like it. But obviously that is no good for them at all. And so, you know, that's causing, you know, significant health issues. It's all causing, they're also feeding it to their young. So young are dying. And I don't think people are sufficiently aware of the role of birds being pollinators as well. You know, and so particularly birds with coral reefs, you know, we're aware of that with bees. But I think that, you know, again, through citizen science, you know, there's that opportunity to build that increased awareness of how integrated the ecosystem is and how important.
Like now, in this week, Malaysian celebrating Environmental Week. Yeah? So we are talking about environment, but how many people are talking about bees? I give you an example when people use drone to spray the pesticide, for example. And then at the same time, we are talking about high class, high values or whatever, high quality of honey from our bees, and then our tropical flowers and so on. This is a conflict that we need to teach or make people understand. And through citizen science, we can train them, we can tell them how to gather the information, and then MNS can help to analyze it. And we have an expert to look into this matter.
Yeah, very
and then,
powerful.
Of course, so this is the approach. What I want to touch a little bit on this, because we have, until now, people are still talking about our oil palm industries. People are talking about we are cutting forests. People are talking about orangutan. People are talking about, like what Mr. Balu mentioned just now, sun bear, sun bear, especially the oil palm close to the forest, and the sun bear came out to the oil palm and then finally adapt to human settlement, and same thing with tape also. So how is it fair or not, the pressure that putting by the, say for example, the European, they boycott our oil palm and so on, because we at the same time we have enough still forests, and then we do work hard on the wildlife management. For example, we have good policies, and the lacking is maybe enforcement, because we don't have enough people, and then the gaps again we discussed earlier on public. So why don't, because we know this oil palm is good for us, and then why don't the whole world use the oil palm and then do research on high productivity? We don't cut the forest anymore, and then at the same time try to protect nature. Many people are contributing to Sipilo, orangutan, for example. This is an example, right? So instead of say no, why don't we think positive, business, biodiversity conservation, protection, and so on? Because if we boycott, for me, it's creating more problem, especially now when the COVID-19 comes in the world. Need your opinion,
But Balu is far more informed on palm oil. But objectively speaking, I think I'll pose a question to Balu. And I don't have any deep experience here, so big caveat. I don't really know what I'm talking about. But I suspect, has there been, before Europe, did that,
Were there years where they were trying to engage to, try and make shifts in industry? I suspect that they possibly were, and there wasn't change in business as usual, and so perhaps this is one way to really force that into action, but I don't know. Balu?
Okay.
Balu, very good point, Sue. Traditional business as usual. So they must be creative enough. I can highlight more, say, for example, in Strait of Malacca. So before that, let Balu comment on that.
Yeah, okay. If you ask us, okay, as an NGO, our stand about this oil palm plantation, actually we have no issue with oil palm plantation, but the main issue is deforestation. Okay, so we don't want more forest to be cleared and converted into plantation. So that is our stand. All right, because why? Because the forest is where all of our terrestrial biodiversity is locked up. All right, so we are one of the 12 mega diverse country. Okay, and 80% of the biodiversity is locked up in the forest. So the moment you start deforest these areas, right? So our wildlife have nowhere to go. Okay, so they will go into a very slow mode of death, basically, extinction. Okay, as a figurative speech, if you go back to the early 1950s, we had about 80% of the country, forested. When you come back to the current scenario now in Peninsula, you are having about 40% of the country forested. So that is actually from 80 to 40, 50% decline in our forest cover. Okay, so if you follow the IUCN definition for red list for even for areas, or even red list for species, that actually automatically by default qualifies most of the forest dependent species as as threatened, basically. All right, so this is something that we need to observe, because when we do business and a responsible business, we don't want to be responsible as well, for the extinction of species. So this is our stand. All right, going back to palm oil footprint is not a national footprint. It is a global footprint. We produce the oil palm. It's not for Malaysia's consumption. We are selling it to the world. All right. So you need to also hear what are the consumers telling you and what they want. All right. So this is very important. Okay. So this is where actually the sustainability, the customers wants the sustainability certificate or labels in it. Okay. So in Malaysia, MNS is working very hard to make sure there should not be a ban on palm oil from Malaysia. We work with the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil. We work closely with the responsible roundtable for sustainable palm oil to make sure their standards are a standard that we can meet. Our industries can meet, because we are world leaders. So definitely it will be easier for us to meet those standards as compared to a country which is now coming up and trying to adopt that particular standard, right? So we have a lot of experience in Malaysia that we share through the standard development, okay, and make sure, all right? So that as an industry, the palm oil can thrive. Okay, I always tell people, okay, Malaysia's companies, they are not owned by one particular person. Okay, say for example, Stein Darby, FGV, and so forth. Right? The shareholders are very diverse. When you kill that industry, you kill every Malaysian, everywhere, right? So you're not actually targeting like Microsoft, Bill Gates. Anything happens to Microsoft, only Bill Gates will die, right? But here is different. Okay, so it's very important. Even so, this is why I think MNS is well positioned. We are Malaysian. We think, about the Malaysians' interest first. All right, whatever it is, we still think about the Malaysian interest. We think about the Malaysian biodiversity. What is it for the world? Okay, I know after this maybe Prof can elaborate further on it. But the idea is we want to work closely on the sustainability standards. People are making sustainability standards, making sure our oil will get the advantage they should get in the global market. It will be able to communicate well. I think this is where we are always lacking. Malaysia has never been able to communicate well all the good practices that we are doing, but we can do it through this system of certification and so forth.
If I could just add at one point, and it's it sort of has been said before, like by you, Prof, that we're into this decade of action. Action, not talk. And perhaps there's been a few years of talk without the appropriate action, and so we are going to see different sort of external forces or market forces where the pendulum is going to swing right the other side because it's necessary to shift into action. And that's perhaps what's happened here, and it's most likely what we're going to see in other sectors as well.
Yeah, good. I think we have long discussion. We need to have a very focused, I hope, pursue MNS and as I mentioned, MNS and BirdLife International already on the track, right? So maybe after this, we sit down, we identify the priority because we want to meet the SDG 2030, achieve at least how many, I don't know how many percent. If you ask me, I want 100%. But it's very complicated. We have the policy, we have the politician, we have the politics, meaning the leaders and the public who pressure the politician. We have B40 issues, we have corruption issues, we have the priority at the local areas that not well defined. This is the issue that MNS is facing. We educate people, we want people to know our mission and then how to do it. As what Mr. Balu mentioned just now. Say, for example, we want to have a certificate for timber, for example, one way of controlling. But now we are proposing the certificate or whatever name you go for the ecosystem. We want to, right? If you don't protect the area, say for example, we have the classified area like environmental sensitive area, class 1, for example. And then we have to look at not just water, we have to look at habitat for important animals, all right? Some animals cannot climb the steep hill, for example. So we have to protect the flatlands at the bottom so that the animal can move around. And then many other things that's very integrated. We need to understand biology and ecology of the forest. That's why I said now we are working together with BirdLife International on the creating awareness, public understanding and so on. But now after that, we go deep into research that we are doing with hornbill, for example. Now we identify the breeding season, we identify what are their special diets, for example, and how stable is their diet, their breeding performance, we are monitoring. Maybe next issues on more detail, how we mentioned about bees just now, how pesticide, bees, and pollinators, other pollinators, and the hornbills, for example. So this kind of thing, we need to do it. Otherwise, you mentioned about scientific evidence, right? Without scientific evidence, very difficult to convince. That's why I personally, and I talk as a president MNS everywhere, we want to link with the universities. We need more members from the universities. We have MNJ, Malayan Nature Journal. We have MN, Malaysian Naturalists, so that people can contribute the ideas, write up whatever the findings in this journal we can share. And then we need more people to do research. By having research, we have a good data, and then we explain to public we educate teachers and children, for example, using the data. Otherwise, they didn't see. Say, for example, we want to protect Ulu Muda. What is that for? You know, they ask, what is that for? The rain is coming, it's flooded every year. You know, why you bother about water? How to understand, how to make them understand about this. Why we need to keep elephant? Why we want to translocate elephant? Why should we translocate elephant? You know, elephants belong to Ulu Muda. You should stay in Ulu Muda. Why we move to somewhere else? This question we need to explain to the public. But without research, we cannot do it. So I think we can stop here. This is a very good discussion. So I went through your presentation. It was very good, and then we're looking forward to work together. And then last time we talked with Miss Dr. Home from BirdLife International. Also now you, and then I hope we can have a special series of talk between BirdLife International and MNS. We share knowledge and experience, what you have experienced in other places, and bring it together. We share it with our members and Malaysian in general, so that we truly understand about the biodiversity conservation, protection, and now we highlighted about the biodiversity and business. So with that, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the kind invitation to join.
We should meet one day to discuss further about the future of business and biodiversity in business. And Mr. Balu, keep working hard. Is our head of conservation, helping me a lot and make MNS moving towards our right direction. So thank you very much. And then everybody, all the participants also, thanks for support. And please join MNS, visit www. I always advertise this. So www.mns.my and register as a member, support MNS, support conservation protection of wildlife and habitat in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.